Following something like that, I don't know how I can do this, honestly, because it's so far beyond what I do for a living. But I want to thank President Chris Luff and Dean Singleton and the entire staff for allowing me to be here today at your Innovation Day. I'm humbled more than you can imagine for a lot of reasons, and hopefully I'll be able to make you understand why. And we're going to focus on, first of all, the relationship to what my company does and what we're going to try and do at the end of this program. Okay, when do you become an entrepreneur? Now, I'm going to ask a question. I know there are not a lot of students in here, but does anybody know what a newspaper boy is? I see somebody nodding their head. Okay, what is that? Can you tell me? You're right. And I don't mean Nintendo's arcade game now, okay, of 1984. But in small town America and in major cities, there was a time when newspapers were delivered to the front door. I mean, literally. At age 12, I became a newspaper boy. And I didn't know it, but that was my first entrepreneurial experience. And the paper route, as it was called, I had 88 customers. And every afternoon after school, diligently, and on Saturday, I would deliver those papers. And then every Saturday morning, I had to go door to door and I had to collect the money for those newspapers for the week. And after I collected the money, then I had to go down to the newspaper office and pay them for the newspapers that I had been delivering for that week. And as I remember, I earned about $3 a week, which was, to me, was pretty good for a 12-year-old boy, okay? And from the 8th grade on to my senior, halfway through my senior year in high school, I was a newspaper boy. I took that route from 88 papers to 114. And I did it by getting new customers, and I did it by adding customers who would add subscriptions to newspaper magazines, because back then, and I'm going back a long way, you could buy magazines, Time, Sports Illustrated, and tie it into your newspaper. And I was lucky enough to win 4 trips, one every year, one to New York, one to Washington, D.C., one to Dearborn, Michigan, and one to a dude ranch out in Iowa somewhere. Don't ask me why the hell I. Okay. But anyway, I got these new customers, and so I was pretty lucky. But I didn't realize that being a paper boy was a training ground. Never thought about it. But not only did I learn how to operate a business, it taught me a lot, because as a paper boy, I had to manage delivery every day. There's accounts receivable. I had to go knock on your door. Mrs. Jones, the paper, it was a nickel for the paper. So that'd be 30 cents a week for 6 days or no Sunday paper. And then, so I have accounts receivable. I have accounts payable because I got to go pay the newspaper. Then I had to sell the product. I had to provide quality customer service, because they don't want a newspaper in the shrubs or on your roof, okay, or in the rain. They want it at the front door, or they wanted it in a mailbox on the front door. That was it, okay? So at 12 years old, I guess I became an entrepreneur, but I didn't know that. I had no clue, none. Now, let me put that in perspective as it relates to my history and why I think I'm up here in front of you today. Because you see, I'm a first-generation Italian-American whose dad followed his dad to the United States for one reason: a better life. We come from a small village in southern Italy, up in the mountains, overlooking the Ionian Sea. My grandfather and my dad were known as, and all the family were known as landless farmers. Landless farmers. Think about that. So my grandfather in the early 1900s, not only did he come to America once, he came twice. Now picture this, he's coming from southern Italy down on the ball of the foot. You got to go all the way to Naples. Then you got to get on a boat. And of course, we all know back then it was steerage. You all saw the Titanic. My grandfather did that twice to earn enough money to take back. And the first time he was here over a year. And he went all the way, excuse me, to Portland, Oregon, because he was helping build the Continental Railroad. It still blows my mind that in 1903, he did that. That's 120 years ago. Not only did he get to Portland, Oregon once, he did it twice. And just for the record, there were about 15 million immigrants in the early 1900s building those railroads. Did you hear the word I used? 15 million. So that's the kind of history I have. Now, before I got my first full-time job after college and serving in the Air Force, I want to detail for you the roster of jobs that I had. Because you see, I was paying my own way through school, and I was married at age 20. After a paperboy route, I worked in a fast food restaurant. I was a day laborer in a nursery. I was a caddy at a country club. I pumped gas at a gas station. You all don't know what that is either, but you had to pump gas. You know, you pulled in, somebody ran out like this. How many gallons do you want? 10 gallons. Okay, it's no self-service. I worked at a printing company. I was a timekeeper in a manufacturing plant that made fenders for Ford trucks. I was a clerk in a department store, sold clothes in a men's store. I was a clerk at the Department of Motor Vehicles. I worked at the post office. And my favorite job was a laborer in the blast furnace of a company called Youngstown Sheet and Tube, or better known as a steel mill. And if you don't think it's hard work, trust me, you have no idea of what it's like to work in a steel mill. It's unbelievable because we did steel 4 times a day. So the bottom line here is this. No matter how menial those jobs were, or unimportant they may have seemed to be, they're a training course. I didn't know that then, but I do now. And what I'm saying is every job you have, let it be a training course for you. Let it be a roadmap for you. Now, one might say that entrepreneurs are born. I don't know, maybe. What I do know is learning what you're good at is very much on the short list. And when I was growing up, I wanted to be a lawyer. Get to wear a suit. Now, does everybody know who Harvey Specter is? I wanted to look like Harvey Specter. I mean, that's what I dreamed of, man. You wear that suit, you get to interact with business people, you put deals together, you figure out how to do it, okay? You get to deal with those bankers. So I was in pre-law. Now, that didn't go well because spending hours in the library reading about precedent was not really, really good for me. It just didn't connect, okay? What I did know that was while I was shy in a way, really was, I had a way of connecting with people. Because my mom always told me and my little brother to smile every day. Not sure why she said it, but she did. I never forgot it. And remember, at age 12, I was selling papers door to door, and I was pretty successful. So after spending my first 4 years in the corporate world, I was on the administrative side. I was an office manager. I got into sales, first in the hardware industry and then the chemical industry. Ultimately, I got to be a national account sales manager of a maintenance chemical division of $1 billion company, where I spent 3 years really learning how to be a salesman. And the credit goes to 2 people, George Wright, Sid Meier's. They were my bosses, and who taught me more than I ever deserved. They taught me how to listen. They taught me how to sell. George Wright the first big account I ever got was Hertz Rent-A-Car in New York City. And I'm in Atlanta, Georgia now. And I was able to cold call Hertz Rent-A-Car, 1978 or 79, whatever it was. And George said, what we're going to go after, let me ask a question. Who in here has watched the Kentucky Derby? Everybody? Do you know what the Kentucky Derby is? Okay, it's the most famous horse race in the world. So here's a question that George used to pose. Is the first place horse twice as good as the second place horse? Because he wins twice as much money. No, he's not. What the first place horse has is a slight edge. And in selling, that's what you're looking for, the slight edge. And we were able to get Hertz Rent-A-Car with that slight edge. So Sid and George were the guys that got me where I am today. Today, they're called mentors, I'm sorry, whatever. Nobody called them a mentor back then. These were guys that wanted me to be successful, because you know why? Because they both had this mindset. Smart people push you up, dumb people pull you down. Don't ever forget that, ever. Smart people will pull you up. Be around them. Not so smart people will pull you down. I've had that in my head for a long, long time. But throughout the years, there was one thing that always was in the back of my mind, and that was maybe there was a better way. So off I went to become something that probably no one in this room's ever heard of, and that's called a chicken hawk. Anybody ever heard of a chicken hawk? Well, there's a bird in the South, red-tailed hawk, that will prey on chickens, particularly. And so it goes. If you don't understand this, when you go off on your own, you have no salary, you have no company car, you have no expense account, you have no paid vacation, you have no benefits, you have no office. And that's what I did. I gave up working for a Fortune 500 company to become a chicken hawk. Oh, and by the way, I was married with a 3-year-old, and my wife had quit working to take care of our 3-year-old. I think my father-in-law thought I was crazy. But you learn that the urgency to succeed at the highest level, and that self-discipline is a must. You must be self-disciplined. You can't not be self-disciplined. So every morning I got up just like I was going to the office, and every morning we'd taken part of a bedroom and made it to an office and had a phone in there. Every morning I did the same routine, because you can't change. And I believe in entrepreneurs driven by fear. It's not an option. You can't fail. So you choose to be that, and you choose it because you think there's a better way to do it. You believe that. But maybe you're out to prove a boss wrong. Maybe you're out to make more money because you think that job doesn't pay enough. Doesn't matter. But you're driven to at least try. Whether you survive or not can be a long time coming. So you're probably asking yourself, or maybe you are, why would I leave the corporate world? Why would I leave my company car, paid vacation, 401k, health insurance, all of that? Well, I believe that the maintenance chemical business, which was a family business basically around the country, was changing. In 1980, a company called Minnetonka out of Minnesota created a product to compete with a big company called Procter & Gamble, and it was called liquid soft soap. Nobody made liquid soft soap. Soap was always hard in a bar. The big one back then was Ivory soap or Dove, okay? So I thought, well, maybe there's an opportunity, because one of my accounts was Grand Union Supermarkets, which used to be very, very big here in New England 30 years ago. And I thought we had an in. And so I went to my boss and said, hey, maybe there's an opportunity. I thought it made sense, but they didn't, because you see, sometimes management doesn't always agree. And the reason in this case was because the corporation that we worked for, the billion-dollar company, was selling our division. So I was able to raise some money with a private high net worth investor, and we made a bid, and we lost out to an Australian company. And that story goes, the Australian company kept the same model and they went out of business. So they didn't change it. What did I do next? Now I've quit that job, I'm gone. So I started an executive search firm, or better known as a headhunter. I had clients like AT&T and Xerox and now Aluminum and Northern Trust Bank and Bank of New York back then, and a couple of banks in Georgia. And then these contacts led to finding a management consulting company where we did covering a myriad of industries and a myriad of businesses. And that experience led me to co-founding a bank in 1986. Raised $5 million to start it, built it up to $150 million, and sold it to a big regional bank 9 years later. And the taste of the banking industry, though, was fun because you see, everybody thinks banking is sophisticated and all that crap. It's not. Banks is a very simple principle: buy money low, sell money high. That's their product. It's all about spread. They go to the feds, they buy money, and they figure out how high can they mark it up and sell it. That's their product, selling money. And once we learned that, came up with an idea called ebank.com in 1996. And the idea was simple: empower a customer to conduct their banking affairs via the internet and a mobile device, because back then there was no iPhone. So to launch that, we raised almost $15 million, which was the largest capital raise for a new bank in Georgia history back then. And to grasp that concept, you have to understand nearly every financial app that's on a current smartphone we had by the end of 1999. However, in the world of entrepreneurship, you can always count on things that you didn't count on. And one of them's government, and the other one in this case was called Y2K. Now, I imagine probably every student here doesn't know what Y2K was, but the world was coming to an end because it was all the computers couldn't figure out how to ring up 2000. But it didn't spin out of control. But what it did, it made capital very, very hard to find for anything that was related to technology. And make no mistake, I was in the technology business, not the banking business. So we got caught. And like hundreds of others, we were stuck. And even though we had a simple business plan where you would do your banking without brick and mortar, the idea was to build this bank on your phone. We were going to have a network of ATMs all over the country, which there are today. So that's how you're going to do your banking. And our commercial lenders were going to have laptops and use the internet and go to people, the businesses, so that you never would go to a real bank with brick and mortar. Never. And we needed $30 million to execute that business plan. But we couldn't raise it. So eBank became a traditional bank, a traditional community bank, tied too much of its assets in real estate, and went the way of hundreds of other small banks in the early 2000s. And just so you know, I'm not a banker. And I resigned. Now, well, I lost it. Let's go back. Okay. How do you survive? The result of eBank not being a success is what brought me here today, because it's from there I got into the vehicle emission testing business and created a company called Speedemissions. In 1996, the EPA threatened to withhold over $650 million from the city of Atlanta for highway funds, the state of Georgia. And for those of you who have ever been to Atlanta, you can understand and appreciate that, because they're building roads every day for the last 50 years. By the late 1990s, the state of Georgia decided to ramp up their vehicle inspection program. And a former employee of mine came to me, who happened to be running a bank. He had a friend who had a private equity firm and said there might be a fit. Would I be interested in helping start a business? So we founded Speedemissions in January of 2001. The blueprint was very simple. Build a nationwide network of emission testing stores through acquisitions and organic growth, and then sell it to a major auto retailer. The long-term plan, going to take $15 to $20 million. The markets were Atlanta, Dallas, Houston, St. Louis, Salt Lake, Las Vegas, and Las Vegas and LA. And the reason they were picked is because their emission model was the same as Georgia's. So it made operate easy. All was going as planned for the first 5 or 6 years, up to 51 stores from none. Then once again, government this time gets in the way. And since we were a quasi-government related business, we saw our store count get reduced because regulations changed on who could and not get into the business. But it wasn't just government along this time. By now it's 2008 or 9 or 10, and the economy is taking a hit, and there was socioeconomic impact. And then I made a bad decision that consequently really hurt us. And they had a profound effect on the business. But we survived. We're more profitable today than we have ever been. We worked through every challenge that came our way. Never made it to that national chain that we wanted to sell to. Never made, but we're strong and we thrive today. And we did it because we negotiated with our vendors, our landlords. We did it through reducing our expenses and salaries. We did it by staying loyal to our employees. And today, over 1/3 of our employees have over 10 years service. 3 of them have over 20 years service. It's made them very loyal. And we would have never made it without them. And we never, ever gave up, and we never quit. Now, if you're an entrepreneur, you always look for the next challenge. We've been in business almost 23 years, as I said. I guess you could say we've done a couple things right. And over the last 23 years, we've had opportunities. When Apple introduced the iPhone, we came up with an idea and developed an app called Carbonga. Carbonga was an app that could read the codes in your car and tell you if it was going to flunk your emission test. We were recognized by Popular Mechanics for it. That's how advanced it was. And we poured a boatload of money into it. Because back then, programmers weren't charging a few $1,000s. This was the beginning of Apple's app. But we had to scrap it because we found out the market wouldn't pay for it. It wasn't a game. They didn't care. We moved on from that project and we developed another one called cartags.com. And it was an online software program where an emission store could renew your registration while you were having your emission tests done. We thought it was pretty advanced. State governments didn't think so. So we scrapped that one. And then lastly, because we have a pretty good understanding, we got into the junkyard business, or as it's called, auto salvage yard. And it was a very simple model. Buy wrecked cars, take 20 to 25 parts and resell them online. Take the scrap steel and the catalytic converter and sell it. The problem with that is the scrap steel price went from 12 cents a pound to 5 cents a pound. Financial models couldn't handle it. So that project got scrapped. But we kept Speedemissions' core business intact. So we looked for challenges, we looked for opportunities, and we just keep looking. Now, the environment and climate change. We've done almost 3 million emission tests since I've been running this business, over 1 million safety tests. And we've worked hard to keep the air clean and the roads a little safer. So we have a pretty good understanding of cars. But let me give you some insight that you might not know about, which you don't read about as it relates to electric cars. Los Angeles, August. That's what Los Angeles can look like in August. That's what it looked like a few years ago in August. I didn't get one this year. There are 291 million passenger cars on the road today in the United States. Over the past 2 years, as you can see, 13.75 million new cars were sold. So we're on a push to be all electric. If you do the math, it'll take 21 years on the current sales rate to get 291 million cars on the road. 21 years to get all electric cars on the road. Think about that. Oh. Hang on a minute. Go back one. Okay. Bureau of Labor Statistics forecast that 40% of the cars will be electric by 2030, or basically 7 years from now. That's 116 million electric cars. Now, when everybody talks about electric cars, there's another thing they don't talk about. 30 million square feet of office space were produced last year, and all having a central cooling system. 1.38 million new homes were built last year, and 95% have central air. Think about it. So when you read the headlines of newspapers over the last few months in the US, wildfire causes surge in air pollution. Global heat is the latest 2023 extreme heat. Okay. EV cars make the race to acquire, makers race to acquire lithium. Lithium-ion batteries are deemed hazardous. So questions are starting to be created. How are you going to have that much electricity being generated when you're trying to eliminate all fossil fuels? How? How are you going to do that when fracking, if you know what fracking is sucking the oil out of the aquifers in Texas? How are you going to build electric cars, continue to run air conditioning in houses and buildings, office buildings? So these are questions without answers. They're problems without solutions. And if you're going to convert the electric fleet, every year you're going to have 13.75 million new cars. So what are you going to do with those lithium battery or those lead batteries and all the steel from let's run about 14 million cars every year getting scrapped? I don't know. Those are just questions I'm asking. So in closing, let's talk about the entrepreneur in the business world. I want to share some names with you you may recognize and a couple you may not. Jeff Bezos told his boss at his hedge fund that his dream was to create a company that sold books on the internet. I trust everybody knew that. He's going to sell books in 1998 on the internet. Steve Jobs didn't believe in market research. Didn't believe in it. Quote, "It isn't the consumer's job to know what they want. It's hard for consumers to tell you what they hard to tell you what they want when they've never seen anything remotely like it," when he introduced the iPad. Bill Gates said, "Going into business with Paul Allen and hiring Ballmer was the best decision he ever made." Larry Page and Sergey Brin were the geniuses behind Google. Fred Smith, the founder of FedEx, said, "I can compete better than the post office. I can deliver packages better than the post office." Howard Schultz, Starbucks, people, we can put a coffee shop in every corner. People pay $4. You heard about Zuckerberg earlier. Let's connect with our Facebook, our friends from high school. John Mackey, the creator of Whole Foods. John Kelleher, or Herb Kelleher said, let's create an airline called Southwest where we'll go to cities the big boys don't go to and we'll cut the price. And my favorite one is a guy named Sam Walton from Walmart. Because you see, you went to the clothing store to buy your clothes. You went to the shoe store to buy your shoes. You went to the grocery store to buy your groceries, and on and on. He said, well, let's put them all under one roof. And created Walmart. And there was a man named Narayana Murthy who created Infosys out of India. And Muhammad Yunus was the founder of Grameen Bank, who happened to win the Nobel Prize. So what I'd like you to do some research on those names, because they were deemed by Fortune magazine the 12 greatest entrepreneurs of our time. So as you review those names, you'll find out that there's no overlap in background or interest, not about education or working for Fortune 500 companies. What you will find is that they thought they had a better way. And that's what led them to do what they did. They leveraged everything they learned, every experience they had, and they developed a passion for it. So I'm not going to quote cliches and metaphors and all that stuff, because I don't want you to change. You don't have to change the world to be a successful entrepreneur. What you must do is what each of them did. Find a better way to do it. So tomorrow, there's their names. So tomorrow, show up, pay attention, ask questions, don't quit, and believe. Because you're here on this Innovation Day not to listen to this speech and all the presentations you've heard for 4 hours. You're here to make the climate your agenda. Show us how, as Steve Jobs said, you can make a dent in the universe. So what you're going to do, you're going to tell every one of your friends. You're going to go to that front yard. You're going to go to projectplanetusa.com. You're going to scroll down for more information, and you're going to learn how you can help change this environment and be rewarded for it. Thanks.